Let me begin by reading a few sayings of Sri Ramakrishna. Verily I say unto you that he who yearns for God finds him. He finds God quickest whose yearning and concentration are greatest. Like unto a miser that longeth after gold, let thy heart pant for him. Men weep rivers of tears because a son is not born to them. Others wear over their hearts with sorrow because they cannot get riches. But how many are there who weep and sorrow because they have not seen God? He finds who seeks him. He who with intense longing weeps for God has found him. As the child beseecheth its mother with importunities for toys and pies, weeping and teasing her, so he who knows God to be his nearest and dearest, his own, and who like an innocent child weeps inwardly with earnestness to see him, is rewarded at last with the vision of divine beauty. God can no longer remain hidden from such an earnest and importunate seeker after him. Verily I say unto thee, he who longs for him finds him. Go and verify this in thine own life. I must attain perfection in this life. Yea, in 3 days I must find God. Nay, with a single utterance of his name, I will draw him unto me. With such an earnest love, the Lord is attracted soon. The lukewarm lovers take ages to go to him if at all. The subject of our talk is how to cultivate love for God. Any spiritual aspirant yearns for the love of God. The more he does spiritual practice, the more that yearning increases. And afterwards he begins to feel, after intense and long-drawn spiritual practices, that his real yearning is so little. Then he cries in sorrow, as it were. He prays for a fraction of genuine love for God. Ramakrishna used to say that a kind of skylark goes up in the sky. That kind of skylark would not drink water excepting drops of water that come from rain. So that skylark would go high up and reverberate the whole sky with its pathetic cries. Give me a drop of water, give me a drop of water. In the same way, a spiritual aspirant whose love for God is intense cries for a drop of genuine love. In Bengal, in villages, I have seen, when there is a great drought, peasant girls, children, come and go from house to house and they sing, O my brethren who are good, also my brethren who are not good, give me a drop of water, give me some water, so that I may go home drenched in rain. There is great drought, and these children come and sing in such a pathetic way. They are singing, and the songs are so pathetic. O my brethren who are good, O my brethren, also those who are not good, give me some water, so that I may return home drenched all over. In the same way, a devotee, when there is a drought of devotion in him or her, cries, give me a drop of water so that my thirst may be quenched. These things are done not only by those who are of devotional temperament, even those who go for knowledge, for the path of philosophical inquiry. They also do these things only in a little, slightly different way. For them, the definition of devotion is yearning for the realization of the self. You see, whenever there is yearning, then there is the devotion. Yearning is an emotional factor. We yearn for certain things. We might yearn for God with some preconceived idea, and we might be yearning for the knowledge of the self, for the knowledge of what we really are. There is the emotional factor. Shankaracharya, those who belong, and others, those who belong to monistic schools, they also say that the need for devotion, only the definition of devotion is yearning for the knowledge of the self. Whereas for the devotees, this devotion, bhakti, means love and devotion to God, love for God. But it does not make much difference though, when the definitions are different. It is yearning for the knowledge of the self, and the knowledge of the self means real love for God. And in order to realize God through love, that love must be very intense and genuine. We start with certain amount of love we feel, but afterwards we find the amount of love, the degree of love with which we started, it was nothing. Then we see how hollow was our love. It was not real. Yes, there was some semblance of love, but it was not real. As we grow in spiritual life, we see what real, genuine love is. As in music, those who do not know any music, any sound is all right if it comes from a record or if it comes from an organ. But when one knows music really, then one knows what is genuine music. And he longs for that. He cannot stand if the music is not so good, if the music is not so sincere and genuine and intense and of high character. In the same way, devotees afterwards find the hollowness of love which he had, which he took for love for God. And then he is in a difficult situation. Then he prays more and more and intensely. Ramakrishna would pray to God pathetically, even after he had realized, after he has finished all his spiritual practices. He would be pathetically praying to God, most probably or naturally, just to show others how to pray to God and what is the genuine character of devotion to God. He would say, give me, O Mother, unalloyed devotion, unselfish devotion. And what is the character of unalloyed devotion, unselfish devotion? The next thing he would say, I do not want any bodily happiness. I do not want earthly riches. I do not want name and fame. I do not want even psychic power. Just see, everything that is covetable is denied. We long for happiness. We are particular about bodily happiness. Next, we are particular about money and earthly wealth. Next, we are particular about name and fame. And he goes further, psychic powers, miraculous powers by which you can do many extraordinary things, which is not possible with ordinary persons. So the love is so intense that it does not care for anything. The body, which is so very dear to us, is altogether forgotten. That is the kind of intense love about which Ramakrishna says that if you have that kind of love, in a moment you will realize God. When you have that intensity of love, God cannot remain far off. God is trying to draw us, but afterwards the devotees draw God towards them, they say. In the beginning we try to reach God, but when our love is genuine, God is attracted to us by the power of our love, of our devotion. Ramakrishna would say, this kind of unselfish love, unalloyed love for God, can be had only by those who are not subject to ignorance. That means those who are eternally free, those who are born, these persons are born with such genuine love for God. They never forget the presence of God. These persons belong to another category. They belong to a class by themselves. They have not to make efforts to get love for God. As a genius, as a musical prodigy, has not to make ordinary efforts. He at once goes into the heart of music. He understands it and he can bring it out. We hear of some musical prodigy who, even in their boyhood, while they are very, very young, could play fine music. What was the matter? They had musical instinct. In the past life, perhaps they had done it, and at once the music comes. In the same way, there are some persons who are eternally free. They are never under the bondage of matter. They never forget the presence of God. And so they have genuine love for God, unselfish, unalloyed, intense love for God they have. Ramakrishna mentioned that some of his disciples belonged to that class. Swami Vivekananda was one of them. We could see he was the volcano of love, not only volcano of strength, but his love for God was so intense. Even when he was under the influence of skepticism, one could see his search for God and truth was so genuine. It has a tremendous velocity. It has a tremendous power. Even when he had no love for God, his search for God was so tremendous. One could see he was born with that feeling. He belongs to a class by himself. Ramakrishna mentioned some other disciple, Swami Brahmananda, eternal companion, was one of that class. He would say they had not to develop love step by step, inch by inch, by like ordinary persons. The love is genuine within them. Easily just scratch it and it comes out. But one thing important for us, then such love is not altogether non-existent. It is not simply a theoretical thing. Such love has been found to exist in certain persons. But the difficulty is, if such kind of love belongs only to a particular class of persons, we are all nowhere. We are gone. Because we have not born with that idea. Everyone has not born as a genius. So what is the matter? How can we develop our love of God? Develop our spiritual life. That's the most important thing. Yes, Ramakrishna said that some persons are born with such genuine love. But he did not deny that the others cannot acquire that kind of love. There are persons who are born geniuses. There are persons who have many parts as gifts from God from their boyhood. But there are many persons who achieve greatness by their efforts. Ramakrishna did not deny that by our efforts we can succeed in spiritual life. The question how to develop love for God arises with respect to those persons who have not genuine love for God, but who have certain amount of spiritual yearning or spiritual quest, And for them the question arises, how to develop love for God. In the world we find some persons are born geniuses, but others try and plod and get success. I think it was Edison who said that genius means 90% aspiration and 10% inspiration. You work hard and then you succeed. And he said, I'm not more capable than anybody else, but one quality I have, I never give way. Whenever there is difficulty, I never own defeat. I continue, I struggle, I persevere. That is one characteristic of genius. But we forget that even geniuses had to work hard. We think that they had many advantages, but they had to work hard also. This is true in ordinary worldly life. This is true in spiritual life also. In spiritual life we hear so much of the statement of grace. Nothing can be done without the grace of God. This is true, but those persons who talk of grace, those persons who preach grace, also say that you must make an effort. You must make a sincere and intense effort. That effort turns into grace. Or, in other words, grace does not come unless one makes a tremendous effort, intense effort. We do not know what is the law of grace, but this we know. Those who had the grace of God, they had to struggle intensely against odds, against difficulties. Even saints who are not free from troubles and difficulties. This we know, that if we are to succeed, we have to make an effort. And that effort, if we are to give an explanation, that effort transforms itself into grace. When you make a great effort, when you struggle intensely, then the grace from God comes. As Ramakrishna says, when a child cries and insists, then the mother gives her the thing. He puts in a very beautiful way from the example of Bengal life. The child cries and cries for money to buy candy, and at first the mother refuses, and after she comes making noise with her keys, the bunch of keys, and opens the box and gives away. In the same way, efforts means you cry and cry as a child cries to its mother. Even when a mother does not like to give, mother is forced to give because the child is insistent. That means self-effort. Self-effort brings in the grace of God. That is the most important thing. Then if we look into the facts, how one can develop love for God with efforts, then we have to study the lives of many saints, the lives of persons who have developed their spiritual life, and apply those things into our modern conditions. How can we develop love by deliberate attempts? If you have not continuous love for God, how can you do that? By deliberate efforts. And how to direct our energy. First thing we find, if you have to develop love for God, one great help is to come into contact with persons who have genuine love for God, to live in that atmosphere, to live under the influence of those persons who have genuine love for God. That has a great effect. We take the color of our atmosphere. If we are fortunate in coming into contact with persons who have genuine love for God, if you come into contact with persons who are knowers of God, the effect will be tremendous. We will be fortunate, we will be blessed. Even if we do not succeed completely in our spiritual life, there is no denying the fact we are blessed. We have seen blazing fire. And their influence can transform life. Their influence has transformed many sinners into saints, if you can use the word sinners. Or those persons who had no love for God, those who came to scoff remain to pray. Many persons came to Ramakrishna with not any devotional feeling, with a scoffing attitude. But afterwards, they were turned into saints. They were turned into deeply religious persons. We find in our ordinary things also, if we keep company with bad persons, then we develop some bad, evil qualities. If you are in company of, say, persons who have love for literature, we develop love for literature, love for art, love for music. If not to a great extent, to a certain extent. So that indicates that if we can develop the company of holy persons or persons who have genuine love for God, or even those persons who are earnestly trying to develop love for God. I say all these things because it is not possible for us, we may not be fortunate, all of us, to come into contact with persons who are really knowers of God. But we can come into contact with persons who are struggling. They are a little ahead of us. They are struggling genuinely, perseveringly. If we see their life, unconsciously we develop a yearning for God. At least we can see that the ideal is tangible, that the ideal is practical. And then we develop courage and strength. It is said that the companions of holy people is very, very rare. For one reason, they are rare. Persons who are knowers of God are not very many. And even if they are knowers of God, ordinary persons, how will they recognize them? Many times we are deceived by cheats and charlatans, those persons who make a show of religiosity. So even if you come into contact with holy persons, knowers of God, or genuinely spiritual persons, we cannot recognize them. First, that is the difficulty. Even if we recognize them to a certain extent, we cannot enter into the spirit of their thoughts, to their inner thoughts, to their inner life, because we have not the right kind of understanding. We do not know what spiritual life is. We do not know what are the spiritual thoughts. We do not know what happens in the inner life when one is struggling for spiritual progress or one has succeeded. We do not know. Without doing any spiritual practice, we do not know. That is the difficulty. But if we are blessed by them, if for any reason, anyhow, if we can be under that influence, then the result is spontaneous, instantaneous, and sure. It is said, the knowers of God or those persons who are genuinely struggling for the realization of God live in another atmosphere, the atmosphere of yearning for God. If not in the atmosphere of the presence of God, they live in an atmosphere of yearning for God, and you are caught in that influence. The next thing is, if we do not get such persons, the next thing is, if we read scriptures. Scriptures mean the embodiment of truth, or the truth or the message of persons who have known God, who are really saints. Ordinary religious books will not help you in your religious life. Even religious books or books written on scriptures, scholarly books, they might be very, very accurate, but if you read them, you won't find any impetus. It is all dry. You may enjoy intellectually. What is the relation between Christianity or Islam? Let us say. The history of Christianity, whether Christ lived or not, there might be scholarly discourses on those things. You may feel intellectually very uplifted or find great intellectual joy. But those discourses or those books will not give you the slightest spiritual impetus. Rather, it might have the adverse effect on your life. You see, someone was telling me that he was listening to a lecture about whether Christ existed or not. By hearing that lecture, one feels disturbed because he cannot meet those arguments. If historically, if it cannot be proved that Christ did exist, many devotees will be in difficulty. So intellectual discussions are not synonymous for scripture. Scriptures are the sayings of the person who have known God directly. If you are to read the Bible, just go to the real teachings, sayings of Christ. In the same way, go to the Gita. Gita contains the teachings of Sri Krishna. Go for Buddhism, go to the real teachings of Buddha, not commentary on Buddha, not books on Buddhism. Go to the sayings of Buddha. Even if you take a few sayings, if you take half a dozen sayings of Buddha, they were sufficient for your whole spiritual life. Provided you try to follow them into practice. Now, how to read scriptures? That is also important thing. We cannot study scriptures as we study books in college or to study a subject, intellectual subject. Study of scriptures will be naturally different. One has to think on those ideas. One has not to read much, but one has to think and meditate on those ideas. And strangely enough, you will find that deeper and deeper meaning coming from those few simple sayings. And you will find these are the answers to your problems in life. That is the beauty of scripture. That is the beauty of sayings of persons who have known God or who have developed spiritual life. The reason perhaps is they have thought over those problems in their life. They have passed through those problems, and they have passed rapidly because they lived very, very intense life. So when you read and we begin to think, begin to meditate, that music comes in as from a gramophone record. When the pin goes on and the record music comes in. And in the same way, when you begin to meditate on that, on the saying, on the some simple statements, and when you begin to meditate or when you begin to think deeply, then you find meanings come, answers to your problems come. You find that this is just the solution of your present problems. That is the characteristic of scriptures. But you will get much better benefit from scripture if, without studying much, you study little, think deeply, and what you understand, try to follow into practice. Then you will find deeper meaning. You find when you try to follow into practice, you find there is an answer. You find the direct experience that these are true. And it will be a great joy to you when you find these things are true. You find from your experiences what you said are true. And naturally you will have greater respect for the scriptures, for their saying. And when you have greater respect, you will study more and you will try to follow these principles, try to follow into practice these things more and more. And in that way you will grow. One will act on another thing. From study comes to meditation, and from meditation comes the action, and one will help another. In that way, one, independent of other help, if one is unfortunate not to have any other help, one can develop spiritual life. And another help is discrimination, alertness of mind, keenness of mind, to find out what is wrong and what is right, what is true for our spiritual life and what is disastrous to our spiritual life. Anyone can find that out if one thinks a little, if one tries to develop discrimination or keenness of mind. In the beginning, one will be in a gross level, but as one pursues this trend of thought or the trend of procedure, one will become more and more sensitive. And one will be so sensitive, the slightest idea of doing any wrong will be very, very painful to them when the mind has developed, when the mind has become spiritually very keen. Another great help is if one does some spiritual practice in the form of prayer, in the form of repeating holy name or repeating prayer formula. That will give great help. It is one person came to a saint and said, "What will you say to those who cannot pray? Many persons cannot pray. Those who have not known the benefits of prayer, fullness, naturally, they have no interest in prayer. How can they pray? That's a problem with them. It's a genuine problem. And the saint replies, I advise those persons who cannot pray, try to pray. Even if you try to pray, for a long time it might be a dreary effort, but then there will come a time when you shall get a glimpse. When you shall have the experience of the utility of prayer. In the same way, meditation or repeating some holy prayer formula and so on. That is very helpful. In the beginning, one has no interest, or in the beginning, if one tries a little, one feels dreary. If one feels it is insipid, one finds no interest in it. But if one pursues it, afterwards, one will find interest. That is the experience of many, if not all persons who have tried to live a religious life. There is no other help. Some persons have genuine interest in religion. Some persons are fortunate in coming into contact with holy persons. Some persons are fortunate in finding interest in scriptures, being able to go into the deeper significance of scriptures. But for others, if they are to start, that is the only way to start. And it is said, if one does this, continues this practice for a long time, all other qualities will come. According to the bhakti literature, the devotional literature, these things are analyzed. Ramanuja analyzes these things this way. First, there must be viveka, discrimination. Here, by discrimination, he means a good food. Food should be pure. If the food is pure, if the food is cooked by a pure person, and one will develop spiritual power, spiritual qualities. But it is not possible always to find out whether the food is pure or not, whether the food has been cooked by pure persons or not. And that makes there's a danger in that theory, that it makes religion go into kitchen, what we shall eat and what we shall not eat. Shankaracharya says it means, the real vivekam means, from the sense object, what kind of things we should gather. Yes, there are sense objects all around, but there are things which are good, there are objects which have evil influence on us. So we should have a discriminating mind, just to find out which will be helpful to us. Anyone can know if one thinks a little sincerely what is good for us and what is bad for us. It is not that we do bad things because we do not know. We do bad things, we are compelled to do these things, or we are careless about these things. Everyone has conscience, but conscience is deadened because we do not listen to the voice of conscience. In the same way, everyone has the power, certain amount of power of discrimination, but we do not cultivate that power. Therefore, our ability to discriminate becomes nil afterwards. But if we begin to discriminate, naturally it will become keener and keener. Then, if we have power of discrimination, the next thing is we must follow in practice what we know to be right. Then we have to control our desires. Do not go after things which are inimical to your spiritual life. So we begin to control our desires. All desires should be controlled or regulated. Another way of developing spiritual life or developing devotion is by doing good to others. It is interesting thing. By doing good, trying always to be unselfish, trying always to good to others, not only you give them material benefits, but you get spiritual benefit with it. So one of the important items of developing devotion or spiritual life is miss no opportunity to do good to others. Yes, very often we find it difficult to give help to others because our selfishness is so great. It is inherent weakness of all human beings. But to the extent we just come out of ourselves, we come out of our self-centered life. If you can do that, to the extent we succeed, we get a great spiritual dividend. And it is said, when you just come out of yourself and no ego is left, you get the greatest amount of spiritual benefit out of that. Swami Brahmananda would say, there are ritualistic worship in tantras and elaborate ritualistic worship in various Hindu scriptures. Swami Brahmananda believed in everything. But the easiest thing is simply do good to others. By trying to serve others, you will get all the benefits that you are likely to get from doing ritualistic worship, elaborate ritualistic worship. And therefore he emphasized that idea. Try always to live for others. He serves best, he loves God best who serves all this way. It was not, we think, simply a poetical expression. In poetical expression we find, yes, serve God, serve human beings, and that is the serving God. But he saw the philosophy of it. He saw the intricate meaning of that. That as soon as you just come out of yourself, as soon as you just come out of your self-centeredness, you get the spiritual benefit. And when self-centeredness has been loosened, then we begin to develop love for God spontaneously. Because love for God does not come from outside. It has been covered by our ignorance or by our self-centeredness, by our selfishness. So by whatever means it might be, when you remove that self-centeredness or selfishness, we begin, love for God begins to express itself that way. Then, taking care of the ethical virtues, truthfulness, giving love for hatred, charity, and so on. And another thing which is very important, to have an optimistic outlook, not to yield to mental depression. In spiritual life, in spiritual struggles, there is bound to come moods of mental depression, because the task is so great and we find our parts and our capabilities are so small. Naturally, we feel that the case is hopeless. We struggle against despair. Since Bhakti literature says that one most important thing is to have anavasat. That means not to yield to depression. We know, those who struggle know they will have to struggle long if they are not accepting the first way. They will have to continue that struggle. We want the highest thing, but we are not ready to give the price. As soon as we come to religion, we begin to say the result does not come. We do not progress. But what we do in arts life, what we do in college course, you have to wait for so many years to get a PhD degree. But in the religious life, as soon as you come, you expect that God will come down from his throne from heaven. It requires slow process and it requires great struggle, and we have to persevere against difficulties. Those who have genuine love for God, they will not care for the difficulties, they will persevere. Ramakrishna used to say, there are persons who are hereditary farmers. If they are hereditary farmers, suppose in one season the rain has not come, the crops have not grown, they will not give up their farming because they are hereditary farming. Those who came in a dilettante fashion as a luxury, then they will give it up. There is nothing. In the same way, those who have genuine grounding for religious life, those who are genuine in their spiritual aspirations, they will not give up the attempt, even if the result has not been at once come. But life is not all struggle in spiritual life too. These are the preparatory stages of devotion. After, when you pass through this grinding, pass through this discipline, then the genuine love for God comes. Then it is enjoyable. When a person has known music, then he has found joy in music. And at that time he can continue for the whole night and for the day. He can continue his music. In the same way, after passing through this stage of discipline, dealing, if one is fortunate to have developed genuine love for God, then one is safe. Safe in the reason that will never fall back from the idea. Has found something secure. Yes, there will be struggle even then. Struggle will continue until one has known God directly and completely. There will be struggle. But one has found out the secure ground. And after reaching that state, one has not to fall back. One does not fall back. It is something like that to search for water, for spring. You go this way and go that way, and afterwards you have found out the perennial source of water, the perennial spring. In the same way, you have found out the perennial spring of love flowing from within. Then one is secure. And that is real love. And when one has found out that state of love, one is secure, and it is not far. It is not be long before one has found out God face to face as direct